So, some time has passed since I've beaten the game, and I've given it a lot of thought about whether or not I actually want to do this video, but ultimately, yes, I do want to talk about it because I think it's a good jumping off point to discuss writing. However, I would like to emphasize the fact that good writing and a good story aren't necessarily the same thing, at least in my opinion it's not. While something can be beautifully written, if the reader cannot personally gain anything from it, then they will never see it as a good story, which, of course, means that what one person might feel is a good story, someone else could think is terrible. And this video is just looking at the writing of Shin Megami Tensei V, not its quality as a story. So if you loved the game, that's fantastic. If you hated it, that's fine too. That's not the point. The point is that there was a couple of writing issues in Shin Megami Tensei V. Issues that go against the fundamentals of writing and arguably impact the game's overall plotline. These issues center around 1. The main character and Aogami, 2. The pacing of the story, 3. The supporting cast, and 4. The setting, specifically Tokyo. If you want to jump to a certain point, I'm gonna try and use the YouTube chapter functions feature, so assuming that works, you can go find the parts that you're looking for. Yeah! Alright, let's get into it. Part 1. The main characters. The first, and in my opinion, one of the biggest flaws in the game's writing has to be the fact that both the Nahabino and Aogami have neither personality nor effect on the chain of events that they experience. While the main character is a silent protagonist, that doesn't mean they don't have to have a personality. I reference it very briefly in my silent protagonist videos, but well as silent protagonist is a self-insert, they also have to have their own personality or hinted at backstory to fit into the world. It would be like trying to stick Minato into The Legend of Zelda and make him the hero of Hyrule. The man can take down death, but he's probably way too depressed to bother dealing with Ganon. But there's nothing that really ties Mr. Nahabino to this game. He doesn't even seem to really care about the events unfolding around him. I don't think there are even different facial expressions for the boy, save for the battle animations and the one evil smirk he has in the one ending. Yes, he's the guy with Aogami's knowledge, but if any other person had had his knowledge, there would be no fundamental difference in the story. Take, for example, Persona 4. 3 different people shake Izunami's hand, and each of them does drastically different things. But nothing that happens in Shin Megami Tensei V is in any way, shape, or form impacted by the fact that it is our main character that gets pulled into these events. And Aogami isn't much better. From the moment he magically appears to take our hand to when he takes us to the throne, there is no actual change in his character. Well, he supposedly starts the game wanting to protect humanity before shifting to protecting the main character, nothing about his actions really show this change. From the very beginning, the only thing that he ever does is ask the main character what they want to do, and then promise him that he will do everything in his power to help him achieve his goals. You'd think a character with such a complex backstory as, I got turned into a proto-fiend by my own brother, forced to take on his appearance, witnessed Lucifer's claim that God is dead, and then somehow ended up a coma and lost all my memories, would have some pretty compelling stuff going on. But instead, he doesn't even go through some kind of emotional torment when he watches the very human he is sworn to protect slowly die beside him while he is also bleeding out. His background is glossed over very quickly every time it was brought up, leaving nothing but questions and an incredibly flat character. Now, the reason that a character's personality, especially the protagonist's personality, is so important is that that's a key part of driving the plot. Well, a call to action is pretty standard, it is also only a call. The protagonist has to be the one to make the decision to drive the plot forward. Even if something happens to them, it has to be their reactions that matter. That's why they are the focus of the story and not some random background character. But neither Aogami nor the main character ever takes control. Everything that we do is something that someone has told us to do. The only quote-unquote choice that we ever really make that isn't a non-consequential side quest, because, you know, what's ambiguity and moral differences beside what ending is to see what the protagonist's name is. So the very beginning and the very end. You literally can't even pick what door you leave the classroom from, which, I mean, could have had amazing writing potential, because something focusing on the idea that people have no choice is amazing. but then nothing ever really comes of it. There's no moment where this breaks and it shows to be a good or bad thing in a way that really would pay off. There's the fight with Lucifer and the idea that there will always be an end to everything, but that doesn't truly reflect the situation or make up for the poor writing. Basically, well, yes, the rules of writing are meant to be stretched or even broken. It doesn't really fit here. A passive protagonist can be used for satire, comedy, or a work focusing on powerlessness. But seeing as you become the ruler of the freaking universe and get to make the final choice, that doesn't really apply here. Plus, the lack of control is a part of the second issue. Part 2. Structure. There are two versions of the act structures that are commonly used in writing a story. The 3-act structure or the 5-act structure. The 3-act has a beginning, middle, and end, with the middle taking up the main portion of the story after the beginning has given you the necessary exposition and the end gives you the payoff. The 5-act structure, meanwhile, is pretty much the same thing, only the rising action and the climax are given more emphasis. And Shin Megami Tensei technically hits those points, it just feels very off. Theoretically, Sahori's quest line would be the start of the middle or rising action, however, it goes by so quickly that barely any action happens. The events are also quickly brushed over despite the fact that there are multiple deaths, making the whole thing feel a bit hollow. The Demon King's castle would also have to be part of the rising action, because it certainly isn't the climax. However, it has the same problem as the Shihori arc. Nothing really happens. So let's imagine for a second that these two parts of the game get cut out. Would anything in the turning point, the final meeting of Bethel, have been different? The whole reason each of the branches split away is because of the fact that the Nahabino exists, meaning that Lucifer really did kill the last person on the throne. The only thing that this part really does, besides killing off Tau to make her demon Tau, is highlight the fact that the angels are just as willing to kill people as some of the demons we meet. Sahori's arc also technically tells us more about what a Nahabino is, but that just makes it feel more aligned with the beginning act of a story than the middle, because that's exposition. And then there's the ending. It goes by so quickly that you barely have a moment to register what is happening. Demon Tau whisks you away to unlock the throne without your say, because if you hesitate, she's like, nah, don't worry, we're doing it anyways. And then you immediately meant to make a choice about who you're siding with. One hallway later and your allies are dead, save for in the neutral route where they just don't show up until you've already taken everyone else out. You fight those who oppose you, and Lucifer comes a-knocking. For what is meant to be the grand battle for the throne, which supposedly a many number of people want, you really only have to go through a couple of RNG-dependent fights, thanks to the fact that half the competition is taken out by chance before the battle even begins. And those who do show up are random demons or your supposed friends who barely blink an eye before fight time. Even the consequences of your choices are left to a tiny blurb at the end, and, if you get the true neutral ending, a scene at the train station that is reminiscent of the opening, which suggests that everything you did is really all for nothing and everything has to come to an end eventually. So, instead of your usual triangle kind of peak of a story, Shin Megami Tensei feels more like a straight line, which has a tiny little bump at it near the end. If you as the main character had more action or were more active, this would have helped to raise the action. But they don't. They leave it all up to the supporting cast who, well, Part 3. The supporting cast. The supporting cast just don't feel like characters. They don't even feel like archetypes of characters. Of the people who are meant to be your friends, I honestly really only remember Tao and Dazai's name, and I think that has more to do with the fact that those were the two that Zura and I kept questioning while we were playing. Things like, hey, does no one remember that Tao died? Or, oh no, what the heck is Dazai going to do now? Was almost as common as us popping into the world of shadows to change the essence of the demons in the party. The other two friends, meanwhile, Glasses and Greenscarf, impact the story so little that we didn't even get to question them as we were playing. Heck, Greenscarf only really matters in the fairy town, where she could be replaced by any other student, and the fact that she is one of our opponents is knowledge. Something that is only important in an optional side quest that leads you to an ending where demons and humans are separated, so you know, the whole demon caring about human thing is kinda pointless. Which is another problem. The few bits of character backstory we get come from completely optional side quests that the player could easily miss. Don't remember her name, is apparently the soulmate of the main character because of a whole bunch of loopholes. But you'll never know that we're the person she's looking for if you don't stumble onto her side quest. The only character with any kind of thought-out backstory is Mr. This is totally neutral and not chaos over there, sprouting on about how it doesn't matter if the weak die because they weren't good enough, and this guy only pops up on occasion to sprout his ideals before fading off into an abyss again with his demon girlfriend. So, with the characters having no personality, how can the player connect to them? In Aristotle's Poetics, character, or ethos, is listed as one of the most important elements of a tragedy, and I would personally argue that it is the most important element of any story. While you can put a random person into a story, it is their character, how they act, react, and present themselves, that matter. They must be consistent and appropriate for the story being told to properly meld the plot. In my opinion, the ethos is also important because it helps create the pathos, or passion and emotional connection, to the character and events. And take, for example, a character like Zuko from Avatar: The Last Airbender. At first, he's seen as a villain, the main antagonist who's hunting them down. And then you meet him and learn his backstories and morals, at which point, with a little bit of proving himself to gain the trust, he's accepted into their group. His ethos changed who he was to them. And the same is even true in real life. That's realistically why character defense is a thing in court. Once you know who a person is, you're willing to sympathize with them, open up to them, and be emotionally invested in them. But none of the characters in Shin Megami Tensei 5 really open up to us. At most, you get Dazai mentioning that he feels like a failure, and Sahori dealing with her unrelenting bullies. But the former slicks back his hair after he is seemingly possessed by Satan himself, as he attempts to snake his archangel counterpart into becoming Nahabino, and the latter goes on a bit of a murder spree before dying and never being mentioned again. Meanwhile, Archangel One-Track Mind Abdiel definitely has emotions, but they never actually open up to us. When they reach a point where the circumstances have pushed them to their limits, we kinda drop off Dazai and walk away in the middle of their very important conversation. Without any characters to feel connected to, that really only leaves one thing to push the player forward or to connect to: Tokyo. And that has a whole other problem. Part 4. Tokyo. Tokyo is fading away now that the force that was keeping it together is gone, which is a key part of all the events happening. It's the reason Mr. President wants to leave Bethel, after all. So, you'd think there'd be some emphasis on the city to show you, the player, what it's like. However, you really do very little in Tokyo. Of the 3 times you actually do anything in Tokyo that isn't, hey, go take a nap before going back into the demon world, 2 of them include you fighting demons and not learning more about the world, and the final one is at the very start of the game. There is no emotional connection made to the people in the city or the city itself. The Netherworld is more of a setting than Tokyo, so the only real thing that would push the player and the main character to want to protect Tokyo is the fact that it's a city full of people. And while this creates room for players to choose the other 2 routes, you do spend more than half the game being forced to try and save Tokyo. And there needs to be some motive for these moments beside, I got told to do it. And that would be the end of the section. Heck, realistically, there wouldn't be a section on setting in Tokyo, if not for the fact that the Chaos ending has some interesting lines. Mainly the idea that now that there are multiple gods ruling the world, the different ideologies create conflict. So, does that mean that the Tokyo we were running around in is different from our version of Tokyo? See, in order for our decision to have caused conflict in this way, there must have been one religion around the entire world, or at least the entirety of Japan, the one that Bethel cultivated. But with humanity not knowing about the Netherworld and the demons, how did they manage to get the entire area to follow one religion? And for that matter, how did the change in ruler affect anything at all in the human realm? Clearly, there has to be a difference in game in comparison to our version besides the whole demon thing, but we're never actually told about this, which leaves only questions. Honestly, I'm probably reading too far into this, but the fact that I can ask these questions is kind of a problem. The game has a very long beginning, as I previously said, but it never offers anything to set Tokyo as a place, focusing instead on exploring what Bethel is. In this way, Tokyo sort of becomes this Fabergé egg, a set piece presented to us as being worth so much, but that does absolutely nothing. Even when we take the throne, the epilogue kind of skims over Tokyo, like, hey, congratulations, the whole reason you took the throne in this route is to protect Tokyo and stop it from fading away. What's that? There's war because of your action, even though realistically nobody would notice a difference? Huh. And so the last piece of what was holding the story together becomes just as unstable as the rest of the work. Conclusion. So that's that. My thoughts on the writing in Shin Megami Tensei 5. Like I said before, you're free to enjoy the game and completely disagree with me. I mainly wanted to talk about different writing elements. Yeah. Anyways, that is all, so I'm gonna end this here. If you made it to the end of my rants, thank you. Maybe you can help me answer a question that I've been having. I've kind of been thinking, hey, I don't make videos all that often because I don't want to obviously write about something that I don't actually care about. I want my ideas to come from, like, a natural place. But I don't want to do just nothing, because then I feel bad. So, it would take some time to work out, like, a schedule and stuff, but how would people feel about me streaming? I would probably play Genshin Impact. I would probably have a day of, like, calmer chill games for, mental health, because that is very important to me, advocating mental health. And then, maybe Honkai Impact the Third, I could get into that on stream, people watch. Yeah, just let me know if that sounds cool or if it sounds stupid. Okay, I'm gonna go now. Bye-bye!